Colin, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad to have you here. Or
all right, thank you.
Us here in your kitchen.
Yeah, second week in a row.
That's right. Yes. Back for more.
Yeah. So this class is going to be all about using healthy sauces. Just a little bit about me before we get started. I have been vegan for 25 years. And boys who are 17 and 20, who are just about 18 and 21. Still trying to wrap my brain around, but they have always been vegan as well. So, sauces has really been a big part of that for me, trying to get them to eat healthy food. There were definitely times when, money was pretty tight and, what we were going to have for dinner a lot of times was, what's in the pantry. So, we go in and you find, some can of weird beans or something. I don't even know what to do with that. Some kind of grain like farro that nobody's ever even heard of before. And, you have some quinoa and you don't know what to do with that. And, so then I would have to come home and, look in the pantry and try and figure out, what can I make with all of these random things, maybe some kale from the CSA or something, trying to make something that my kids are going to eat. And if it was good enough that they asked for seconds, then that was a big win for me. So I've been developing these recipes over the years. I've been teaching at cooking classes at a lot of libraries throughout Massachusetts and now New England. And we usually get to in person and, make these recipes and then get to hand out the samples to everybody so that you can all try them yourselves. But unfortunately, we have this different format for the time being. The benefit is that I get to eat all of the food myself, so I don't have to share. It's so nice. Just kidding. I know. I love being able to hand out the samples to everybody. Just to get the feedback was really great. So I teach a lot of classes. Also, last year, the Healthy Vegan Cookbook is my cookbook that was published. And from vegan publishers, that is available on Amazon. So if you just look up Healthy Vegan Cookbook and my name, Colin McCullough, then you should be able to find that, and you can make Jeff Bezos a little bit richer. So there's that. And let's see, you have any questions or anything before we get started?
The big question, or not so much a question, it's just people say sauce makes everything better. So everybody's excited to learn about these sauces. It's all about the sauce.
It does. Yep. Yeah. So, in the cookbook, really one of the features of the cookbook is different sauce recipes. So I have 30 different sauce recipes. I like to have a lot of bowl meals for dinner. So just what I had tonight, actually, one of the recipes from the book. I had a green curry tofu bowl meal with lots of green veggies and the Thai curry sauce and some tofu in there. So it was fantastic. So I like to make a lot of these sauces be really utility sauces. So, I have different vegan cookbooks and, talk about sauces and bowl meals, and they're, very particular about, exactly what you pair with other things, just to have the right taste for everything. But, really, like I said, going back to the pantry, so much of the times it was, what do I have? What do I have in the refrigerator? What do I have in the pantry? And certainly, during these times, so much of us are home, and, there's a limitation on how much you can really go out to the grocery store. So, we're all kind of looking at our pantry saying, okay, what is that and what do I do with it? So hopefully these sauces are going to help you with that. There are a couple of easy sauces that we do. And then the last two are going to be a little bit more involved. Nice thing is with these sauces, you can, make a double batch. They freeze really well. We'll get into that a little bit more. So even the ones that are a little bit more complicated to make, then, make a double batch and then freeze the rest that you don't use. So before we get started, just want to point out, I have a Vitamix, which is a really like a high power blender. Vitamix is kind of an expensive ticket item to get. I believe they're around $350 starting at Target, but you can definitely get them used on Craigslist, on eBay. You can have a couple of devices and appliances and whatnot, but for me, having a really powerful blender is the best investment to make for trying to make healthier food. It breaks everything down really well. It makes a really creamy and smooth consistency of everything. So I wish I was paid by Vitamix to constantly give them commercials, but it's just because I've had one for a long time and I use it, every day for smoothies and sauces and salad dressings and soups, so many different things. So, if you can get one, that's great. If you have a Ninja, like a mid-level blender, like a Ninja or NutriBullet or something, that'll work too. That's fine. It's just the consistency is not going to be quite as smooth and creamy, but it'll definitely work. If you use a regular blender, some of these sauce recipes, when you're blending, nuts and dates and things like that, then it's possible it's going to kind of burn out the motor eventually. It's not really meant for that. So, if you have like the $30 or $40 blender, then that might be something you want to spend a little money and upgrade that in order to be able to make these great sauces. So, first recipe we're going to do today is the lemon tahini sauce. So, anyone who's been to Middle Eastern restaurants, has a good falafel sandwich or falafel pocket, this is the sauce, or similar to the sauce that they would use in Mediterranean restaurants for that. And so again, as a utility sauce, goes over so many different things. I love to have it on falafel, of course, as much as possible, but really with a bowl meal of some beans and some rice and some veggies, it's so good. So I'll show you how to make that. And also, as we come across in these recipes, if there are any more difficult to find ingredients, more specialty ingredients, and we can definitely talk about places you can get that. Fortunately, with the internet and Amazon and eBay, it makes ordering some of the specialty ingredients so easy. So if you're not interested in going into Whole Foods or something like that, then it's really easy to order the stuff online as well. So lemon tahini sauce. First ingredient we're going to use is tahini. So we'll use 1 cup of that. Tahini is ground sesame seeds. So it's kind of similar, I would say, in consistency to like peanut butter. So it's kind of thick, and but it has kind of a unique taste. It's not a really strong tasting thing. The taste of the tahini kind of sits in the background of the sauce, but we use this as a base to help make the sauce really creamy. So put that in. 1 cup of tahini. Tahini, if you can't find that in a regular restaurant, then it's easy to find in ethnic supermarkets, like even Indian and Asian supermarkets have it. Middle Eastern supermarkets, if you're near one, you can. I get mine from Trader Joe's sometimes. They sell it in little jars. You can get that's something you can order online and get it in a big container as well. Just put it in the fridge, lasts a really long time. I'm going to put in a clove of garlic here. It's actually 2 cloves because mine are small. I'm going to put in a teaspoon of grated or powdered ginger, I should say. So put that in here. Also nice cooking. I don't have to use gloves. So when I do classes, I have to be all prepared. All right, 2 tablespoons of tahini. So I'm not going to show it too closely because last night I did and it spilled everywhere. So technicalities. Tamari is it's similar to soy sauce. It's very similar to soy sauce. Tamari is a fermented soy product. So natural sodium, and gives it a really rich, deep flavor. You can just use soy sauce if you wanted to instead of the tamari, but I like to use straight tamari here. Pour that in. That's 2 tablespoons there. And let's see. We're going to put in the juice of 1 lemon, which I've already done ahead of time. Here. Definitely want to get the seeds out of the lemon. The Vitamix will blend it up, but it definitely makes it a little bit more sour. So Also, we're going to put in about a half a cup of water. So the amount of water that you put in totally depends on how thick or thin you want the consistency of this. So if you want it thinner, just put in some more water there. Like that. All right, so I'm going to blend this for a minute. It's going to be a little bit loud. It's one of the great things about making smoothies for my boys in the morning is I don't even need an alarm clock. Just crank this thing nice and loud, and they wake right up. So my apologies for tonight and my other people in the apartment, but all right.
One of the wonders of Zoom is it actually quiets the blender as soon as it starts. So we get at the very beginning, we get a burst, but then it fades into the background. Now, of course, if Colin speaks, we'll all hear it. It'll all of a sudden get loud again. But I like to do a little soft shoe right here. Please do feel free to send me any questions by chat. I'll make sure to relay them to Colin. I'm also watching the feed on Facebook, and I see that on Facebook some people are looking for the recipes. So I will just read really quick what the link is for the recipes in case that's easier. Go to bit.ly/ all one word, Colin Cooks Sauces. That's with an uppercase C for Colin, an uppercase C for Cooks, and uppercase S for Sauces, and then the initials TCPL for Thomas Crean Public Library. I'll go ahead and try to put that in the link again, but it's bit.ly/ Colin Cooks Sauces TCPL, all one word with the capitals as I explained. So, Colin, one of the questions that has come across on the chat stream is wondering how long and how high was the Vitamix on 10? So, a little details just about your mixing technique.
Sure. Let me flip off the water here.
Of course.
So I usually just run it for about 2 minutes on high. I usually don't put it on extra high. Those of you who have a Vitamix know that there's a superpower feature which blows the lid off and makes all the electricity fade out in the house. So I don't use that, but I just run it at full speed for about 2 minutes, and that is able to break everything up okay.
And then there was another question about how long it will last in the fridge.
Okay, very good question. So in my classes, I have what I call a 4-day fresh rule. So anything that you make fresh, like any sauce like this or smoothie or anything like that, only going to last about 4 days. 4 days in the refrigerator. And you know, let me clean it out a little bit more. This is Television Extra. So if you use fresh ingredients, then it should last about 4 days. If it lasts longer than that, then you have to wonder why, because you know, fresh food is only supposed to last when you prepare it for about 4 days or so. So you put it in the refrigerator 4 days. You can put it in the freezer. This is what it looks like. This is pretty thick, as you can see here. So if you wanted to add a little bit of water, you can do that. If you put this in the refrigerator overnight with the tahini, it is going to firm up and get thicker. So, you know, you can put the cap on the mason jar and just, you know, add some water to it, shake it up. So what I like to use, though, this is a silicone ice cube tray. So I like to pour it into the ice cube tray. You know, like I usually make a double batch of this. I'll try not to drink the first half directly because it's really good, but you can pour it in the ice cube tray. I like to use this as opposed to the plastic ones because it's easier to get out, and also the plastic is going to discolor, and it's also going to take on the taste of whatever it is you put in here. Put in a plastic ice cube tray, so you know, if I don't want my ice cubes to taste like tahini or tomatoes or whatever else, then just use the plastic ones for the ice cubes and use the silicone ones for the ice cube. For the sauces. So I'll put it in here, I'll freeze it, and then I'll put it in a plastic bag, like in a Ziploc bag, and I'll just have those cubes on hand. So, you know, I can just pull it out anytime. Really easy to heat back up again. So that's my prop.
Colin, I think you're in tune. We had somebody, just as you started explaining that, ask if you ever freeze your sauces. That was perfect.
Nice.
There is a quick side question. People are worried about blowing out the motor on their Vitamix if you're running it on high. Or if you're keeping it on, let's say, if you run the Vitamix on 10 without putting it on high, doesn't that blow the motor sometimes? I have a Vitamix myself, and I've never had a problem blowing the motor. That I did once I did actually once overheat it, and I had to wait for it to cool down and had a reset that I just had to wait a little bit of time. But yeah. I don't know if you have any experience with that.
Yeah. If it really depends on what it is that you're blending. So, I've seen Vitamix advertise that they can do nut butters and, different things like that, really, really thick stuff. And that's the kind of thing that will overheat it. Fortunately with the Vitamix, it does, as you were saying, it does have that heat shut off. So if it does start to overheat, then it will shut down and cool off for a few minutes. So, but I've had the same Vitamix for about 20 years. I have several now because I have to use them in classes and whatnot. But the one that I have has lasted for 20 years, and I haven't been the nicest to it. So it's really well built, good quality. So next recipe we're going to go with is golden cheesy sauce.
Colin, if you have time, I don't want to take too long. I know you want to get into the next recipe, but there were a couple other questions really quick.
Oh, sure.
One question was just wondering, after you freeze your sauces, how do you reheat them? Do you have suggestions? Do you put them in the microwave? Do you put them in a saucepan? How would you recommend reheating the sauces?
Yeah, either way, really. If you have a microwave, some people are pretty against microwaves. So, if you use a toaster oven or something like that, or, just put it in a little saucepan on the stove and heat it up, then that's fine too. Okay.
And then the other question, which is actually answered in the recipes, so I would encourage people to follow the link for the recipes, is asking what you would put this sauce on. And you kind of alluded to that at the beginning as well, but it could be somebody who missed or joined us a little bit late. There's,
right.
All these sauces can go on so many different things, but what are your favorite pairings for this sauce?
I like to put it on some kind of beans and brown rice and some veggies like kale or broccoli or something like that. In each of the 30 recipes in sauce recipes in the book, I do have some recommendations for each one. Definitely doesn't have to be followed. Really, these are really meant to be utility sauces that you can put over anything, and it's going to make it taste really good. But if you wanted some suggestions, then each of the recipes does have some recommendations.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. I think that's all the questions for now, but I will keep monitoring the stream. So if we have more, just let me know when you're ready for some more.
Okay. Yep. Have it on falafel as much as possible. I love falafel. Can't get enough. All right. So next recipe we're going to do is called the golden cheesy sauce. This one, the recipe in the book uses half a cup of all-purpose flour. And then at the end of this, you would cook the sauce just for about 10 minutes and whisk it, and then that really helps to thicken it up. I really do try to eat as unprocessed as I can for the most part. I like to use whole food ingredients. It's really feels a lot healthier for me to do that. So I don't really use that much flour. I don't really do much baking. So a lot of times when I make this recipe, I just cut the flour out and I just use less water. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. But, really you can do it either way. So normally the recipe calls for 3.5 cups of water. I'm going to put in about 2 cups so I don't have to use the flour. 2 cups of water there. And 1/2 cup of raw cashews. So, this recipe is similar to a different cheesy sauce that when I first became vegan, I started using, but it had a lot of butter in it and different ingredients that I wasn't really thrilled about. I don't really use any oil in the cookbook. Pretty much all of the recipes are no oil, and I'm using nuts and different things to make the sauces creamy, because I used to think that you had to use oil for that, but I found different ways and learned different ways of doing that, which we'll be talking about tonight. So the only exception to that is there are a couple of salad dressing recipes, I think, that use a tablespoon of the toasted sesame oil, because there's really nothing else that I found that really has that taste. So it's not using oil for salad dressing, like a half a cup of it. It's just a tablespoon, and that's just for the taste of it. But anyway, in this recipe, instead of oil or butter, I'm going to use cashews. So it's raw cashews. That's a half a cup there. Fun side note, raw cashews are not really raw. So it's a little trivia thing. Raw cashews are actually cooked a little bit, because cashews picked off of a tree are poisonous. So has a little bit of toxicity to humans. And so if they cook it just for a little bit, it removes that toxicity. So raw is not really raw in that case. And I'll put in 2 tablespoons of tamari. You'll see tamari is a pretty frequent ingredient in a lot of these sauce recipes of mine. I'm going to put in a couple of different spices. So we have 1.5 teaspoons of garlic powder. There's a teaspoon of onion powder here. 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. So the turmeric really helps to make it yellow. Also, if you follow the health doctors, especially the vegan health doctors, they are always cheerleaders for turmeric and all of its great health benefits. So, anytime I can put some turmeric in something, 1/2 teaspoon, you're not really going to taste the turmeric because it does have kind of an earthy taste to it, but it's enough that, especially when you cook it, it's going to really activate the turmeric and make it pretty yellow. So I'll put that in, and then also 1 teaspoon of salt. I like to use Redmond real salt. It's sea salt that's from an ancient seabed out in the Midwest. So technically it's sea salt, but it's from a very, very long time ago. So it has the highest mineral concentration of any salt on the market. So that's what I like to use. That's something you can order online. You can get it at Whole Foods. You could just use sea salt or regular salt, but that's what I prefer to use. So I combine all of that in here. Put that in. And then the last ingredient is going to be nutritional yeast. So this one is more of a specialty ingredient, nutritional yeast. It's an inactive yeast. It gives, it's common in vegan cheese sauces and recipes. So it has kind of a nutty, cheesy taste to it. And it's also usually fortified with a number of different vitamins. So hence the nutritional yeast part of it. So this, I get this at Trader Joe's. They have it. Whole Foods, bulk section, but since they've closed off the bulk section right now, then it's a little harder to find that way, but definitely Trader Joe's has it. You can order this online. Sometimes I get it in like the big tub, and it lasts a really long time. And so I'll put that in here. Go. And we'll run the blender for a minute.
So while you blend, I'll do a little talking. There's been a couple of questions. Somebody missed, I think, the explanation at the beginning about what kind of, or how much water do you use if you don't use flour. And you just reduce the amount of water so that you didn't have to thicken it with flour. I believe right now, I think you said you used 2 cups of water. Is that right? So it was 2 cups. There was another question asking if you soaked the cashews, and those were clearly not so. I don't think those were soaked cashews that you just used. And in a Vitamix, one of the wonders of Vitamixes is that they can work with just raw cashew or with unsoaked cashews.
Yeah, especially where cashews are really soft versus something much harder than almonds, and they are much easier to blend. But if you have a regular blender or like a Ninja or something, then it might help if you soak the cashews ahead of time. The other thing is sometimes people have a sensitivity to different nuts. If people are allergic, then there's nothing that you're going to be able to do for that with the nuts. You don't want to have them, but some people just have some indigestion or stomach sensitivity to them. So for people who just have some insensitivity to different kinds of nuts, then if you soak them overnight, then that pulls out the phytic acid, which is what a lot of people find, gives them issues, stomach issues. So that would help to eliminate that. So, all right. So I'm going to pour this in. You could cook this on medium heat on the stove for about 10 minutes, just to kind of get the raw taste out of it a little bit. I usually just have it straight. As you can see, it's pretty thin. So if you wanted to thicken it up, then again, you could use some less water, or you can use the flour and whisk it. And that'll make it thicker.
And there are a couple of questions about just how much cashews and how much nutritional yeast, or nooch, as I always love to call it, were used. And I believe I just looked at your recipe, and it was a cup of nooch and a half cup of cashews, unless you did some altering there.
No, that's right.
Great.
All right. And, one of the nice things with the recipes is, for so many of the recipes, one of the challenges in writing the book was, I know the recipes here, but I hardly ever measure anything out at home. So when I had to write the recipes down for the cookbook, and the publisher said, hey, we need specific measurements. Okay. So then I had to actually, go through and measure, like, how much of it do I use? Because it's usually, a handful, or, just a spoonful of this and that. So, so many of these recipes in the book, there isn't, the different measurements you can definitely play with. There's nothing in this book that I would say you have to use a half a cup, and you cannot use a quarter cup. It's all variable. Also, where I teach a lot of these classes, sometimes people are allergic to nuts or gluten, or all kinds of different things. We all seem to be allergic to something these days. So one of the things that when I was writing these recipes was, really trying to make them as versatile as possible. So, if you have different allergies, then that's fine. There's other substitutions that you can use. If you follow any of the vegan or vegetarian doctors and they say, you should use a lot of flax seeds every day, then there's so many of these recipes you can put, a tablespoon of flax seeds, like in smoothies and different things, and you just blend it up and you're not even going to taste it. So, again, trying to go for the versatility.
The type of salt it was that you'd like to use, and somebody responded that they believe it was the Redmond real salt, but I just wanted to confirm that was it.
Yeah, that's correct.
Great.
Yeah. So, sometimes when I teach classes, people ask me, do you have recipes that are like 3 ingredients or 4 ingredients, and really easy things to make? And so, my response is usually, I am a very lazy cook. I consider myself to be very lazy. I like to put all the ingredients in the blender, let the blender do all the work. But I don't have too many of the recipes that are just 3 or 4 ingredients. There are some great vegan cookbooks out there that are specifically for that, different food blogs that you can follow, things like that. So that's not really my focus. Like I said, I've been vegan for 25 years. So, I really like really rich and complex flavors. So I don't tend to write, really simple recipes. These next 2 recipes that we're going to do are a little, like I said, they're a little bit more complex. They have more ingredients to them. But I always feel like, if you go from 4 ingredients to 8 ingredients, to me, it usually tastes so much better because it's so much more rich. So, these are going to be recipes that it's definitely worth the extra effort to do. So this one, we're going to put the Vitamix away for a little bit, and we're going to use a food processor for this. So in most of the sauces that I make, I use the blender for that. But in this one, this is the Perfectly Pesto sauce. And so this one, it works a little bit better if you use the food processor. You can put it in the blender. It's fine. You can do it that way. It's going to make it really smooth and creamy, where pesto, you want it to still have some texture to it. So we'll make it in the food processor. So this one is a Cuisinart. This one is kind of a higher end 14 cup capacity. So, you know, I've spent a little bit of extra money. I do use the food processor pretty regularly for desserts, especially, and things like that. So I wanted something that A, I was never going to burn out, just like the Vitamix, and B, something that had a big capacity so that, you know, like if I had a little one, a tiny little food processor, you might have to like make this in batches, and, you know, that's just kind of inconvenient and a pain in the neck. So Perfectly Pesto. So this one is going to be a combination of walnuts and pine nuts. So put that in here. Go. Pine nuts, what I usually like to do is to toast those ahead of time. Just put them in a little skillet and just kind of dry roast those. For pine nuts especially, it really brings out the flavor of pine nuts. So that's what I prefer to do. I'm going to put in 1.5 cups of fresh basil, because what is pesto without basil? Sometimes I see people have recipes where they put in kale instead of basil. I just don't understand that. Can't have it. So to me, there is no such thing as too much basil. Love it. I'm going to put in 1 chopped red pepper. Yeah, red bell pepper. Right. And then I'll put in 1/2 cup of cilantro. So for those of you who don't like cilantro, then you might not like this recipe, but you could just take the cilantro out. Not totally necessary. Cilantro makes everything better. It's so good. One thing with cilantro is in a recipe like this, where I'm not using it for garnish, but I'm actually putting the cilantro in, you don't have to stem it. The stems actually are where most of the flavor of cilantro is. So again, not using it as a garnish. You don't have to, you know, pull all the leaves off, which are time consuming. Okay, yeah. All right, we're going to do, it's going to be a quart of nutritional yeast. So it helps to give it a little bit of a tang to it that you usually have with pesto. The juice of 1 lemon here, which I've already squeezed. And put in 1 clove of garlic. Again, putting in 2 little ones because they're tiny. And then we're going to put in 1 teaspoon of salt. So where this one is a bit more of a dry sauce to it, this would be harder to do this in a blender. If you didn't have a food processor and you want to use the blender for doing this, then I would say just add like 1/2 cup or 1 cup of water, just so that for the blender, it's going to give it more to be able to blend up there. So just run this for a minute here.
Colin, while you're doing that, there was one question that I went and checked your recipe, which was how much nooch did you add? And I believe it was 1/4 cup, because that's what your recipe said. And then there was another question about whether you put, you know, how do you dry roast your pine nuts? Do you put anything else in the pan when you dry roast, or if it truly is just nuts in a pan over a, you know, medium or what, you know, walk us through your dry roasting process perhaps a little bit more for folks who haven't done that before.
All right, well, I'll even show you. I have a tiny little cast iron pan that I use for dry roasting things. So I'll put the pine nuts in the pan, put it on medium heat, and you need to stir them pretty constantly because you definitely don't want them to burn. They do burn pretty quickly. So you just stir them just for a couple of minutes. You know, they go from white to kind of a brownish, you know, just before they burn. You don't want to do that. All right, but no oil or anything else. I just dry roast it. So this does help if you take the cover off and just scrape it down. So we're going to do that a couple of times. Right. And
there was another question, really quick, Colin. As you're using the food processor there, Have you ever tried doing this with just an immersion blender or some other way of chopping everything up? I mean, I'm sure old school Italian chefs used to make pesto by hand. You could probably do it with a knife and just labor for hours, but
Right.
certainly a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely goes with my lazy cooking, letting the appliances do all the work. So an immersion blender, if you were going to do that, then you would want to add some more liquid than what I did here. I do want to show you. I just scraped it down one more time. I'm going to run it one more time, but you'll be able to see that even without, the only liquid that I put in here is the lemon juice. But as everything blends up, the basil, the cilantro, the red pepper, all has liquid in it. So as it blends up, then it definitely makes it creamier. So. And you'll also be able to see the red bell pepper that was in here as well. If you really wanted to make it as green as possible, then you would use the green bell pepper, but I kind of like the difference in color here. So this is a great sauce. I like to put this onto, the recommendations that I put is you could use whole wheat orzo, cannellini beans, roasted zucchini, roasted cherry tomatoes, garlic, baby bella mushrooms. This would be fantastic on top of that. This is so good. It's one of those recipes that, I might take like a spoonful out, put it on, and then a spoonful and eat it myself. It's great. Love that. All right. So I will later and not bore everybody to death with that. And then the last one we're going to do, let me move this stuff over here. Last one we're going to do is the Jamaican jerk sauce. So this one, if you take a quick peek at the recipe, you will see there is a fair amount of ingredients in this one. This is definitely not the 3 ingredients or less, but it has, there are a number of different spices that you put together for this one. With this recipe, if this is one that you really like and you end up making this or, some of the other recipes that have a number of different spices in it, then, one time-saving thing is to just, take a mason jar, maybe a pint or a little half-pint jar, and then just pre-measure out all these spices in bulk. So all you'd have to do is like take a tablespoon of that and scoop it in. It would make it go a lot faster. So let's see. This is sort of my whole food, healthy whole food take on a recipe that normally tends to use canned ingredients and oil and things like that. So we try to swap those out and make it a little bit healthier. So I'm going to put in a 1/4 cup of raw cashews. Start here. I'm going to put in a 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to do 1/3 cup of apple cider vinegar. So you can use just regular vinegar if you wanted to for this. In most recipes in the book where it calls for vinegar, I do like to use the apple cider vinegar. It just has more health properties than just using straight white vinegar. So, and it's got a great taste. So that's what I like to use that. I'm going to put in two medjool dates. So if anyone was watching the smoothie class that I did last week, we talked about dates. So dates are really the only whole food sweetener that you can add. So unlike sugar or agave nectar or honey or maple syrup or anything like that, those are all extracted and processed sweeteners, whereas the medjool dates, it's a natural form of sweetener. So I usually get these from Trader Joe's. I should be wearing a Trader Joe's apron because I mention them all the time. No, I am not paid by Trader Joe's. It would be fantastic if I was, but they have the medjool dates. You can find dates at most supermarkets. It's just usually regular supermarkets would have they're called Deglet Noir dates, which are smaller and they're already pitted usually. And but these are larger and chewier, and they're a little bit easier to put in the blender. So if you don't have a Vitamix, then this might be something that you would want to soak in hot water for like 10 or 15 minutes just to kind of soften those up. So, one nice thing with the Medjool dates is that because they're a whole food sweetener, then there's all the fiber here. So the fiber hasn't been stripped and taken away. So all the healthy stuff is still in here. Medjool dates usually come with the pit in it still. So you just want to make sure that you do not put the pits in, because the Vitamix will just turn it into baby pits. And that is the pits. All right, so there's the dates. I'm gonna put in whole tomatoes. So this is something, usually when you see these recipes online, it's gonna call for a can of tomatoes, but the fresh tastes so much better. So I like to use the fresh. I like to use the vine tomatoes. I don't ever buy the individual single like beefsteak tomatoes. I really love the vine tomatoes so much better because, you pick up those vine tomatoes and you smell them, and that smells like a tomato, where those individual beefsteak tomatoes is, I don't know what it is, like plastic or something, but I like to use those. So nice thing with Vitamix, if you have a really good blender, you don't need to worry about taking the seeds out or the peels off of the tomatoes or anything. That would be way too much work. Let the blender do it. It just pulverizes everything, blends it right in. And again, you're getting the whole food product, as nature intended. So I'm going to put in 1/4 cup of blackstrap molasses. So
really quick, before we move on, as we were talking about dates, there was just one follow-up question, wondering if you've ever played with freezing dates. And I don't know if that's ever something, they last for a long time, I know, in the fridge. I've had dates that I have forgotten about in the back of my fridge, and they were perfectly fine after probably way longer than I should admit. But I don't know about your experience.
Yeah, I've never tried freezing dates. I use them so much in different things that I make for smoothies and desserts and sauces and things that, I just kind of blow right through them. I don't keep them in the refrigerator though. They do last for a while out on the shelf. If you put them in the refrigerator, then they really tend to firm up, and it is harder to blend them. It just doesn't come out quite as smooth. So, if you're going to put them in the freezer, just make sure they're really well defrosted before you put it in. So, I also, in the cookbook, I don't use oil in most of the recipes. I typically use, for sweetener, I use dates. I don't really call for recipes with sugar or agave or maple syrup or anything like that. There are a few recipes like this one where I use blackstrap molasses. Molasses is a traditional ingredient in this recipe for jerk sauce. There really isn't anything else that tastes like that, so that I'm aware of anyway. Blackstrap molasses, actually, of all the different sweeteners besides dates, is the only other one that actually has some nutritional benefit to you. So I wouldn't say guzzle it down, but in a recipe like this, I'd put it in. So there's going to be 1/4 cup of molasses. I have a few recipes in the cookbook that use some molasses. Just more for the flavor than anything else, because it's really hard to get that flavor otherwise. All right, I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of tamari. Shocker, I know, to everyone. There are actually some recipes that I don't call for tamari, believe it or not. Just the 4 that I chose for tonight, they all have tamari. So normally I put in one bunch of chopped scallions. I didn't have time to run to the store and get scallions, but as an alternative to that, I am going to put in 1 shallot, which is a really mild onion. So, in this case, scallions are really mild, and the shallot would be as well. So, put that in there. Like I said, it's versatile. You can swap things out depending on what you have. I'm going to put in 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to put in 1 inch of fresh ginger. So I always have a root of fresh ginger in the refrigerator, but if not, you can buy the root, the knob of the ginger. You can cut it up into 1/2 inch or 1 inch pieces, put it in a Ziploc bag, and freeze them. Ginger freezes really well, so you can do that. And then this is the point where there's a lot of dry spices and ingredients past this, so we'll walk through that. So I have a teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper here. So put that in. And then as far as the spices go, I put them all in a jar, all mixed together here. So we have 1 teaspoon of dried thyme, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. I like to use the smoked kind instead of regular because it really adds a little smoky flavor to it. It's really nice. Goes well with the molasses. And I do 1/2 teaspoon of ground chipotle pepper. So that one, the chipotle pepper has a bit of heat to it. So one where if you want it to be spicier, then you can put in more than just a 1/2 teaspoon. I'm kind of a wimp for spice, so I don't really like to put in a lot, but 1/2 teaspoon is going to give you a little bit of heat.
I think I'll use a full teaspoon, Colin. Thank you.
What's that?
I'll use a full teaspoon.
Absolutely, yeah. I put in 1/2 teaspoon of ground allspice, a quarter teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. So put all that in here. So I blend this together, and then this is one you definitely want to cook on the stove for 10 or 15 minutes over medium heat. We're using a lot of the raw ingredients like the tomatoes and the cloves and the garlic and the ginger. All of that is going to have a really raw taste to it. So you want to cook it for about 10 or 15 minutes just to kind of cook that raw taste off. And it's perfect. So I'll blend this for a minute.
So while Colin does the blending, I'll go ahead. There is on the Facebook stream, somebody was putting in a very great shout out for Good Health, the health food store we have on Hancock Street in Quincy. Colin, I don't know if you've ever been to Good Health, but it's a fabulous independent health food store that I think started, I don't know if they started, but there's a great vitamin section and they have great organic produce. So I was really grateful to see somebody give a shout out. And if you haven't been, I'll have to come and take you on a tour. I was in there the other day. I was really impressed when everything was really locked down. It's the only grocery store I've been in that was strictly limiting the number of people using the store to just 10 people. Because it's a little, there's several aisles, but you never feel like people are right on top of you, which I really appreciated. Nicest people who work there. I'm not getting paid by Good Health either, but I just want to give them a shout out because they're really good folks.
I love me a small natural health food store. I always love to go in one anytime I'm in the area. I give a shout out to the ethnic supermarkets, the Asian supermarkets, the Indian ones. I love going into Indian supermarkets. They have so much unique produce, and I love to cook Indian food, so I'm there all the time. They know me. And
we've got some awesome Asian supermarkets in Quincy too. So
yeah.
Cam Man and Super 88, and there's a couple new ones I haven't even explored yet. So yeah, we've definitely got a wealth of those. One other question that somebody asked while you were, it was shortly after you added the molasses, is if you found any substitutes for molasses. And I'm not sure why it has such a distinct taste, but I don't know if you could do like a smoky agave, or, you could do a maple syrup perhaps, but it would be sweeter and wouldn't have that tang, that kind of, I don't know. Have you found anything good?
I suppose if you didn't want to do the molasses, one thing that you could try is to use some liquid smoke, at least. If you usually find that in a regular supermarket in like the condiment section. So it's basically just water that's been infused with smoke. And, so you just put in like a 1/4 teaspoon. It's going to give it a lot of a smoky kind of flavor. So that and the ground chipotle, the chipotle adds some smoky flavor to it. And then also smoked paprika as well. So I wouldn't say that that's an exact equivalent, but, as far as the molasses go, It's going to give you kind of that smoky flavor. And then if you wanted to add a few more medjool dates in place of the sweetener of the molasses, then that would be good as well. Yep.
I remember hearing once that brown sugar was actually white sugar plus molasses. So I know that you don't cook with sugar, but other folks who maybe have brown sugar around would substitute a little bit of that just as an extra sweetener too. But that would be introducing refined sugars, which is not something everybody wants to do.
Right. Yep. So this is all ready to be cooked on the stove. So if you were to have that right now, then it does smell fantastic, but definitely has a very raw tomato taste to it. So, that's definitely something that I would cook. So the recommendations for this one, if you were to go to a Jamaican restaurant, then let's see, they use a lot of black beans, I believe, different kinds of rice, and let's see, veggies. I think green bell pepper would be great. If you rough cut some onions, put in there as well. They like to use plantains, a lot of plantains, so you could fry up some chopped plantains for that as well if you wanted to. So
you can throw it over some proteins too. I've had a lot of jerk, like tempeh or jerk tofu or a jerk seitan. I've enjoyed a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that one is all set. So again, if anybody was coming in late, just take a second to plug my book, The Healthy Vegan Cookbook. And there are over 200 recipes here that it's healthy whole food eating. So I have 30 different sauce recipes. I have 30 different smoothie recipes as well, which we tackled last week, 4 of those. And then for next week, we're going to be doing the third in this series of cooking classes. Next week, we're going to tackle whole food healthy desserts. So actually, when I submitted my book to the publisher, then I had the dessert section is called Healthy Snacks. And so then the publisher said, where's the dessert section? You have a cookbook, you need it to be in, you need to have a dessert recipe section. I said, no, it's a healthy snacks because, you can have it as a dessert or you can have it as a snack, in the afternoon. All of these things freeze well. They're easy to freeze. So, you can even put some of these in the blender with some water and make a smoothie out of it. So I have it for breakfast. So, again, versatility, trying to go for that. So if you join us next week, then I will be doing healthy whole food desserts as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. I'm really looking forward. I left last week hungry for smoothies. Now I want some sauces. I got to pour them over everything. It sounds so good. There's been a couple other questions, and if people have other questions here at the end, they're certainly welcome to put them in either the Facebook chat or in the YouTube chat. I'm sorry, the Zoom chat that I'm watching. I put another link to the recipes that you shared with us, and I will let everybody know if they follow that link. There's links both to your website, and I took the link from your website to the Amazon page for your book. So if people want to purchase the book, that's probably the easiest way to go about buying it right now.
It is, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. There was one question that came in, which was somebody who joined us last week remembered that you talked about Instant Pots, and you were making, I think we talked about making yogurt in your Instant Pot, and they're wondering what kind of Instant Pot you have. So you want to give a little spiel about your Instant Pot experience? And is Instant Pot a brand? I think it is a brand, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have different models, I assume. I don't know a bunch about Instant Pots myself.
Yes. I have the Instant Pot Duo, which is, I believe, a 6-quart. So they make smaller ones. They make larger 8-quart sizes. But mine has the one of the many buttons on the side with the presets. Mine has the one that says yogurt. So if you wanted to make yogurt and a vegan yogurt in an Instant Pot, then you're going to need the one that has that on it, that has that button. So I actually started with an Instant Pot years ago. I had, as I'm into cooking, and I've, been to a number of other cooking classes of people that other people have done. And, especially with making Indian food, which I really like to do, then There are a number of things that I was told in the classes, like like the chickpeas, for example, the garbanzo beans. In an Indian restaurant, they are always so light and like fluffy and great texture. And no matter how much I boil them on a stove at home, it just never has that texture. And so the person who was teaching the class that they use in the restaurant, they use a pressure cooker for those. So I was afraid, with the pressure cooker blowing stuff up all over my kitchen. And, she told me you have to get one. And I was pretty reluctant for a while. But then when I saw the Instant Pot and, saw that was kind of gaining in popularity, it has all the presets on the sides to be able to cook different things. It has the lid that you put on, and it locks in place. It self-locks in place. So there's really no way that you can take off the lid once the cooking is started without releasing the pressure first. So you're not going to have lunch or dinner all over your ceiling like I was afraid of. So I really like mine. Yeah.
We had somebody who said, I didn't know this, I hadn't heard this before, that an Instant Pot just came out with a model that also has air frying in it.
Yes.
I've always wondered how air frying actually worked. Do you have experience with air frying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah. Yep. I actually teach an air frying class, so I have
something to explore in the future. Right on.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. For people especially who want to do low oil or no oil cooking, but still be able to have their French fries, then air fryers are great. I have no experience with the Instant Pot lid that becomes an air fryer. From what I've heard on some of the groups, I'm on some Instant Pot websites on Facebook, that I think it functions pretty similarly to the other ones. But I like to make a number of different, like I used it for dinner tonight. I made the tofu for the green curry tofu. And so for me, I will add just a little bit of oil, like a teaspoon of oil, into a bowl, and then coat the tofu in that, and then put that in the air fryer. It takes about 15 minutes, but it comes out really nice and crispy, really just like what you would get in a restaurant where they deep fry everything. So it's a much, much healthier way to do things, and it's very fast, heats up very fast.
That sounds a lot easier. I did a whole bunch of tofu on a flat top last night, which is a little, like, I had a ton of heat coming off of it. An air fryer would be a lot nicer, I think.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. And also, there are a couple of times that I have, just for the sake of experimenting and try to do a little bit of deep frying on the stovetop. And what a pain in the neck. You have to buy all this oil to put in, never mind the fact that it's super unhealthy. But you put all this oil in and you use it once, and then, like, what are you supposed to do with that? It's super inconvenient. You can burn yourself really easily. And, I was watching a video recently on YouTube that was talking about, don't ever deep fry at home. And basically they say, look, in a restaurant, if you're using a deep fryer in a restaurant, it's big, uses a lot of oil, and you put things in a basket, and there's a lot of room for them to boil in the oil and get crispy. But if you're doing it on the stovetop, you're going to burn yourself, and everything's just going to stick together because it's in this small little tight area. And, basically they said, just don't try to recreate it at home. It's just not going to come out right. So
that, and I think I would weigh about 400 pounds if I kept deep frying at home, because I like to deep fry too much. It'd be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So
plus, your house smells like a deep fryer. So in an air fryer, it doesn't do that.
That's cool. There's a couple people asking where they can see last week's video. So I replied directly, but anybody who wants to go and watch it can go out to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Thomas Crane Public Library, and it's there. We're working on doing some post-production still on it, and that's taking a little bit, but they can watch the raw recording from last week. And
Excellent.
People are also wondering where else you teach classes. So hopefully they'll come back and see your class with us next week, but I don't know if you have any other classes you'd like to plug.
Let's see. I think next week, the one for Thomas Crane is the one that I'm doing for next week. But on my website, colincooksvegan.com, I do have a Google Calendar which shows the different places that I'm teaching at. So if you want to catch some of the other classes that I do, like for example, last night for a different library, I did how to make Thai curries from scratch, which sort of, as the name implies, it's definitely not a easy 4-ingredient recipes or anything. But when you make, I like to make Thai food, Thai curries. If you make it using whole food, fresh ingredients, and it tastes so much better than anything that you're going to be able to get out of a can or a jar or anything like that. So, I just did that last night, but I do a lot of classes for the different smoothies and sauces and desserts. And it's kind of getting a little too hot right now for soups, but I do a fresh whole food soups class and air fryer class and all kinds of different ones. So.